Nina Voss couldn't help but sigh as she carefully cataloged yet another ancient Earth relic that her alien colleagues had excavated. The small research station orbiting old Earth, as it was now known throughout the galaxy, hummed with activity as various species busied themselves with what they considered the important archaeological work. Specimen A4721, potential ritual object, carbon dated approximately early 21st century, she muttered into her recorder, turning over a plastic spore from a fast food restaurant. Her alien colleagues had classified it as a ceremonial feeding implement used in communal consumption rituals. Nina knew better, of course. It was just garbage. But as the only human on the archaeological team, her insights were rarely taken seriously. After all, what could she possibly know about galactic heritage studies? Your classification protocols remain inadequate, Human Voss, came the distinctly metallic voice of her supervisor, Professor Toax, a tall, willowy being with iridescent skin who belonged to the Corlac species. You continue to lack proper contextual understanding of ancient civilizational artifacts. Nina forced a smile. Of course, Professor. I'll try to broaden my perspective. The Corlacs made a dismissive gesture with one of their four appendages. See that you do. The Intergalactic Heritage Committee expects precision in all cataloging. As Professor TZYX glided away, Nina's colleague and only somewhat friend on the station, Lux 7, a bioluminescent being from the aquatic world of Maryland, sidled up to her workstation. Don't let the old fossil get to you. Lux 7 bubbled, their skin pulsing with sympathetic blue light. Everyone knows humans are kept on these teams as a formality, since old Earth is technically under heritage protection. Thanks, Nina said, genuinely appreciating the sentiment despite the backhanded nature of the comfort. What's on the agenda for today? Lux 7's skin rippled with excitement, shifting to a bright yellow. You haven't heard? They found something big in excavation Zone 42. The Gakoi representatives are all abuzz. Nina raised an eyebrow. The Gakoi Consortium, the most powerful political entity in the galaxy, rarely took interest in Earth archaeology. Really? What kind of find gets the mighty Gakoi excited about human trash? No one knows yet, but it's being transported here under Level 7 containment protocols. Before Nina could respond, the station's announcement system chimed. All classification specialists report to Central Chamber for specimen unveiling. Priority clearance. Repeat. All classification specialists to Central Chamber. Nina exchanged curious glances with Lux 7 before they both hurried toward the station's hub. The Central Chamber was already crowded with various beings from across the galaxy. Some humanoid, others decidedly not. All chattering in their native tongues while translation devices created a background hum of overlapping synthetic voices. At the center of the room stood a cylindrical containment unit, glowing softly with biosecure force fields. Beside it, looking immensely pleased with themselves, stood Dr. Kalam Vrani, the station's expedition leader. Colleagues, Dr. Vrani announced, their voice cutting through the chatter. What we have discovered today may reshape our understanding of pre-contact Earth civilization. The doctor gestured dramatically, and the containment field became transparent, revealing a small pink rectangular object with dual screens. Nina blinked, then had to stifle a laugh. It was a Nintendo DS, an old handheld gaming console. She'd had one exactly like it when she was a kid. Behold, continued Dr. Vrani, oblivious to Nina's reaction, the dual-screen Oracle, an information and communication device of remarkable sophistication for its era. Our preliminary scans indicate ceremonial significance, possibly used by high priests or knowledge keepers of ancient Earth. The assembled scientists murmured appreciatively, recording observations and taking scans with their various devices. Nina bit her lip, uncertain whether to correct their misunderstanding or let them continue their earnest misinterpretation. Dr. Vrani motioned toward the group. We require expert analysis. Who among you specializes in ancient Earth communication devices? Several tentacles, appendages, and a few hands rose. Nina, against her better judgment, raised her hand as well. Surprisingly, Dr. Vrini pointed at her. Human Voss approach. Your genetic familiarity may provide insight despite your limited academic qualifications. Nina approached the containment unit, aware of the many eyes, optical sensors, and other sensory organs focused on her. Through the field, she could see the DS more clearly now. It was in remarkably good condition, considering its age, probably preserved in some airtight container before being buried. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the containment field. Dr. Vrini looked uncertain, but nodded. "Proceed with caution. We have not yet determined if it contains dangerous energies." The field dissipated with a soft hum, and Nina carefully lifted the device. It was just as she remembered. Lightweight plastic, the hinges still intact. A wave of nostalgia washed over her. "This is actually a recreational device," she began to explain, called a Nintendo DS. "It was used for, out of habit." Her thumb found the power button and pressed it. To her shock, the device actually turned on. The screens illuminated with a bright blue glow, and the startup sound, a familiar ascending electronic tone, echoed through the suddenly silent chamber. Every alien in the room took a collective step back. Dr. Vrani's complexion turned a pale shade of alarm. "It lives!" gasped someone from the back of the room. The top screen flickered, and instead of the expected Nintendo logo, strange symbols began scrolling across it. Symbols Nina had never seen on any DS before. The bottom screen illuminated with a pulsing circle, and a synthetic voice emanated from the speakers. "Reawakening protocol engaged. Primary user. Human DNA confirmed." A beam of light shot out from the device, scanning Nina from head to toe. The entire station's lighting flickered, and alarm klaxons began to sound. "What have you done?" Dr. Vrani shouted over the noise. "Containment protocols. Initiate containment protocols immediately." Security officers rushed forward as the screens on the DS flashed more intensely. Nina stood frozen, still holding the device, as chaos erupted around her. "All systems compromised," announced the station's AI. "Unknown program infiltrating network architecture." The DS spoke again, its voice now louder and more defined. "Primary user identified. Nina Voss. Welcome to the chronoarchival interface. Would you like to continue where you left off?" I never had this game," Nina stammered, bewildered. "Security breach in central chamber. All non-essential personnel evacuate." The station's warnings blared as lights flashed red. Two security officers grabbed Nina's arms. "Relinquish the device immediately, human." "I'm trying," Nina protested, but her fingers wouldn't respond. It was as if the DS had somehow bonded to her hands. The device's screen flashed again. "Hostile environment detected. Emergency translocation initiated." A sphere of energy expanded outward from the DS, enveloping Nina. The security officers were thrown back by an invisible force. The last thing Nina saw was Dr. Vrani's horrified expression before her vision was consumed by blinding light. And then, nothing. Nothing but the sensation of falling through endless space. Nina awoke with a start, gasping for breath. Her head throbbed, and her vision swam as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. She was no longer on the research station. That much was clear. Instead, she found herself in what appeared to be a small clearing in some kind of forest, but the vegetation around her was unlike anything she'd seen on Earth. Bioluminescent fronds swayed in a gentle breeze, and the sky above her was a deep purple dotted with two moons. The Nintendo DS lay beside her, its screens still glowing softly. "What the hell just happened?" she muttered, sitting up slowly. "Spatial translocation complete. Welcome to Sector 7G, Planet Viridia," chirped the DS. A small holographic projection emerged from the top screen, forming into a miniature humanoid figure made of light. The hologram stretched, as if working out kinks in non-existent muscles. Much better. Being compressed into that storage format for centuries is absolutely murder on the photonic resolution. The hologram, a female figure with a distinctly quirky appearance, short, pixelated hair, and an outfit that seemed to be a bizarre mix of formal business wearing video game character costume, twirled around to face Nina. "Who? What are you?" Nina asked, scrambling to her feet. "Oh, right. Introductions. I'm DOETY, Digital Observational Time Tracking Yielder. But you can call me Dottie. Everyone does. Or did. It's been a while." The hologram made a sound like clearing a throat it didn't have. "And you, Nina Voss, have just activated one of the most sophisticated pieces of technology ever created by your species. Congratulations. Or condolences. It really depends on how the next few days go." Nina stared at the hologram, then at the DS, then back at the hologram. "I don't understand. That's a Nintendo DS. It's a video game console from the early 2000s. Dottie laughed, to sound like digital wind chimes. "Oh, that's just a shell. A disguise, if you will. The founders had a sense of humor. Hide the most powerful technology in what everyone would dismiss as a toy. Brilliant, really." "The founders?" "Yes, the original programmers. Look, we don't have time for the full history lesson right now. Those stuffy Gakoi representatives will be tracking our translocation signature, and they'll be sending agents to recover this device. And probably dissect you, given how integrated the biometric locks are now." Nina felt a chill run down her spine. "Dissect me? Why would they?" "Because, my dear new friend, you're holding a device that can rewrite reality as the galaxy knows it, and you're the only one who can operate it properly." Dottie floated closer to Nina's face. "The chronoarchival interface doesn't just record history. It can alter it, restore it, or completely reimagine it. And the Gakoi have spent millennia making sure that power stays buried." Nina looked down at the innocent-looking pink DS in her hands. "This can't be real." "Oh, it's very real. And we should get moving. This location was randomly selected for emergency purposes, but it's not secure. Try pressing the X button and the right shoulder button simultaneously." Too shocked to argue, Nina did as instructed. The screen changed to display what looked like a map of the galaxy, with countless tiny dots of light pulsing across its expanse. "These are temporal nodes, places where the fabric of space-time is thin enough to allow for translocation," Dottie explained. "Select one that's at least 3 sectors away." Nina hesitantly touched a point on the screen. The DS hummed, and the hologram of Dottie flickered. "Good choice. Hold tight." Once again, Nina felt the strange sensation of being unmade, atom by atom, before being reassembled elsewhere. When her vision cleared, she found herself in what appeared to be an abandoned structure of some kind, with high ceilings and walls made of a material that seemed to shift colors as she looked at it. "Welcome to the ancient archives of Xanther," Dottie announced. "Abandoned for about 3 centuries now, after the Gakoi declared it historically insignificant. Their mistake is our breathing room." Nina sat down heavily on what she hoped was a bench. "I need you to explain everything. Right now. What is this device really? Why can only I use it? And why are the Gakoi so afraid of it?" Dottie's hologram sat cross-legged in the air before Nina, her expression becoming more serious. The full story would take days, but here's the condensed version. Long before humans achieved space travel, there was a civilization known as the Originators. They weren't just advanced. They had mastered the fundamental forces of reality itself. They could manipulate time, space, matter, energy, all of it. "They sound like gods," Nina murmured. "Many civilizations thought they were. But the Originators weren't interested in worship. They were explorers, researchers, creators. They seeded life across the galaxy, including on Earth. But they also made enemies. Powerful entities that feared their capabilities." Dottie gestured, and a complex series of images appeared in the air. Star maps, timelines, alien script. The Originators knew they were facing extinction, so they created tools, interfaces that could preserve their knowledge and potentially restore what would be lost. They hid these interfaces in plain sight on various developing worlds, disguised as items that would be overlooked. This particular interface was hidden on Earth, designed to bond with human DNA because humans were one of their most promising creations. Nina stared at the DS. "And they put it in a Nintendo DS? How is that even possible?" "Not initially. The interface adapts to contemporary technology. It was probably a stone tablet once, then a book, then who knows what else before taking this form sometime in your 21st century. It evolves to remain hidden yet accessible. A distant sound, like thunder, but more mechanical, interrupted their conversation. And that would be the Gakoi, Dottie said grimly. They've tracked us faster than I expected. But why? What do the Gakoi have against the originators? The Gakoi consortium wasn't always the dominant power in the galaxy. They rose to prominence after the originators' disappearance by controlling the narrative. History, Nina, is written by the victors, and the Gakoi have been very careful about what parts of history get remembered. The rumbling grew louder. We need to move again, Dottie urged. But first, you should try accessing one of the recorded memories. It'll help you understand what we're dealing with. Press the A button while selecting the flashing icon on the bottom screen. Nina did so, and immediately the world around her seemed to shimmer and transform. She was no longer in the abandoned archive, but standing on what appeared to be an observation platform overlooking a vast city unlike anything she had ever seen. Structures of impossible geometry reached toward a sky filled with crafts that moved without any visible means of propulsion. Beings of light and energy communicated without sound, their very essence pulsing with information. This was the originator's homeworld, Dottie's. Voice came from beside her, though the hologram was no longer visible. What you're seeing is a stored memory, a perfect record of a moment in time. It's beautiful, Nina whispered, watching as the memory continued to unfold. In the distance, something dark began to spread across the sky, like a stain of absolute nothingness that consumed everything it touched. And this was the beginning of the end, Dottie said sadly. The conflict that erased them from existence. The memory abruptly ended, snapping Nina back to the abandoned archive. The rumbling was now directly overhead. Time to go, Dottie exclaimed. Try the code sequence, up, up, down, down, left, right. That's the Konami code, Nina said, recognizing the famous video game cheat sequence. The interface has a sense of humor. Just do it. Nina input the sequence, and the device glowed. Emergency evasion pattern activated, it announced, just as the ceiling above began to crack. Light engulfed them once more, and Nina felt herself being pulled across space. This time, however, something went wrong. The sensation wasn't smooth, but jagged, as if they were being torn across reality rather than simply transported. When the world reformed around her, Nina found herself standing on a barren plain beneath an alien sky. But something was off about the landscape. It seemed younger somehow, untouched, and in the distance, moving across the horizon, are those dinosaurs. Nina gasped. Dottie's hologram flickered back into existence, looking distinctly worried. Oh dear, it seems the emergency protocol engaged the temporal functions rather than just spatial translocation. We've gone sideways in time, not just space. We've time traveled? To when? Where are we? If I had to guess, we're still on Viridia, just about 65 million years ago, give or take a few millennia. Nina stared at the distant herd of creatures that did indeed look remarkably like Earth's dinosaurs. How is that possible? Dinosaurs on another planet. Parallel evolution is more common than you'd think. Life finds similar solutions to similar problems across the cosmos. Dottie floated closer to the Nintendo DS. But that's not important right now. What's important is that we've just demonstrated one of the device's most powerful and dangerous functions, temporal displacement. You mean time travel? In a manner of speaking, yes. But it's more accurate to say we've loaded a different state of reality. The interface doesn't just move through time. It accesses recorded states of the universe and can restore them, like loading a save file in a game. Nina stared at the device in her hands with newfound awe and terror. So this thing can rewrite history, only in limited ways and specific locations, but essentially yes, which is precisely why the Gakoi want it destroyed or under their exclusive control. Dottie's holographic form glitched momentarily. And speaking of the Gakoi, That temporal jump won't fool them for long. We need to find somewhere secure to plan our next move. And go in? The future? The past? Let's try for the present, but somewhere less conspicuous. The interface should have a preset for safe locations. Try opening the settings menu. Nina navigated through the strange blend of gaming interface and incomprehensible alien technology until she found what looked like a list of save locations. What about this one? It's labeled Refuge Alpha. Perfect. That's one of the emergency shelters the originators established. Select it, but this time, press the L and our buttons together to stabilize the translocation. Following the instructions, Nina activated the sequence. The world dissolved more gently this time, reforming into what appeared to be a small, dome-shaped structure nestled into the side of a mountain. The interior was sparsely furnished, but contained what looked like sleeping quarters, a food production unit, and various technological interfaces that hummed with quiet energy. "Welcome to Refuge Alpha," Dottie announced, her hologram expanding to full size. One of many hidden sanctuaries established across the galaxy. We should be safe here for at least a few hours while I bring you up to speed on exactly what you've gotten yourself into. Nina sank onto a conforming chair that adjusted to her body's shape. "I'm listening." The interface you're holding isn't just a record of the past. It's a key to restoring lost realities. The originators created it as a failsafe against temporal manipulation. You see, they discovered that time isn't as fixed as most species believe. It can be altered, rewritten, even erased completely. Like changing the past to affect the future. More like accessing parallel timeline potentials and making them the prime reality. Dottie projected a complex diagram showing intertwining lines of light. The Gakoi rose to power by eliminating certain timeline potentials that threatened their dominance. They didn't just conquer their rivals, they erased the very possibility of those rivals ever existing. Nina felt a chill. That's terrifying. Indeed. And they've been doing it for millennia, carefully sculpting a galaxy where their authority is absolute and unquestioned. The interfaces were the originator's insurance policy, a way to restore the erased potentials if necessary. A soft alarm chime from the DS. Dottie looked concerned. "What now?" Nina asked. "We've got company. A Gakoi enforcement vessel has entered this sector. And, oh, this isn't good. They've sent a chronological integrity officer, one of their elite agents. What does that mean for us?" "It means they're taking this very seriously. These officers are trained to track and neutralize temporal anomalies, which, unfortunately, now includes you." The refuge's entry portal hummed, indicating someone was attempting to access it. "They found us already?" Nina jumped to her feet. "Apparently so. The interface must have left a more significant temporal wake than I anticipated." Dottie looked genuinely worried. "I suggest we prepare for a rather uncomfortable conversation. Chronological integrity officers aren't known for their diplomacy." The portal slid open with a hiss, revealing a tall, imposing figure. The being that stepped through had an almost crystalline appearance. Faceted skin that reflected light in mesmerizing patterns, eyes that seemed to contain swirling galaxies, and a uniform that appeared to be made of liquid metal. Human designation Nina Voss. The being stated in a voice that somehow seemed to echo from multiple points in time simultaneously. "I am Chell, Chronological Integrity Officer, first rank. You are in possession of a prohibited reality-altering device. Surrender it immediately and submit yourself for memory rectification." Nina clutched the DS tighter. "And if I refuse?" Chell's crystalline features formed what might have been a smile on another species. "Refusal is not a recognized response pattern. The device will be secured. Your cooperation determines only the level of cellular disruption you will experience during the process." Dottie floated forward. "Officer Chell, as the interface's custodial intelligence, I must inform you that forcible separation will trigger catastrophic reality destabilization. The human is now biometrically linked to the system." Chell studied the hologram. "Artificial intelligence designation DOETY. Your operational parameters are outdated. The Gakoi Consortium has developed extraction procedures for all known originator technologies. Really? Dottie sounded skeptical. Then you know about the Cascade failsafe? A flicker of uncertainty passed across Shell's features. Explain. If you attempt to separate the interface from its designated user, it will immediately execute a full temporal reversion to the most recently archived state of reality. Dottie paused dramatically, which in this case would be approximately 3 billion years ago. Pre-Gakoi, pre-everything you know. Nina had no idea if Dottie was bluffing, but she maintained her grip on the device and tried to look confident. Shell stood motionless for several seconds, internal calculations almost visible behind those cosmic eyes. Finally, the officer spoke. Verification required. Demonstrate interface functionality. I don't take orders from you, Nina said, surprising herself with her boldness. Perhaps not, Shell replied coolly, but you will find cooperation preferable to the alternatives. Dottie whispered to Nina, show them something small but impressive. Try the reality filter function, the Y button plus down on the directional pad. Nina followed the instruction. The DS hummed, and suddenly the refuge around them transformed. The walls became transparent, revealing not the mountain exterior, but a vista of stars and nebulae, as if they were standing in open space. Reality overlay engaged, the device announced. Perceptual filters removed. Shell visibly tensed. Disengage immediately. Why? Nina asked. Is seeing reality as it truly is a problem for the Gakoi? Unfiltered perception leads to cognitive destabilization in most sentient beings, Shell stated flatly. The consortium's reality filters protect the sanity of the galaxy's inhabitants, or control what they're allowed to perceive, Dottie countered. Nina, try the historical record function. Third icon from the right. Nina activated the function. A stream of images flowed around them, historical events from across the galaxy. But what caught Nina's attention were the discrepancies, moments where the images would split, showing two different versions of the same event. In one version, peaceful negotiations. In another, brutal suppressions. In one, a thriving civilization continuing to evolve. In another, the same civilization mysteriously declining and disappearing. What am I seeing? Nina asked. The divergence points, Dottie explained. Moments where the Gakoi altered the timeline to ensure their preferred outcome. Shell stepped forward. Enough. These are restricted historical interpretations. They represent theoretical calculations, not actual events. Then why is this interface recording two separate reality states for the Mabari Accords? Nina pointed to one particularly striking divergence. In one, the Mabari civilization joins the galactic community as equals. In the other, they become a Gakoi protectorate and eventually fade into obscurity, which is the version taught in every educational institution across the galaxy, Dottie added. Shell's crystalline form seemed to vibrate with tension. The consortium's historical curation ensures galactic stability. Unrestricted access to alternate potentialities creates dangerous social disruption. You mean it threatens Gakoi control? Nina retorted. You're not protecting anyone. You're enforcing your version of history. For the first time, Shell appeared uncertain. My directive is to secure the interface and return it to consortium custody. And if we refuse? Nina asked. Then standard containment protocols dictate I should neutralize both you and the device. Shell paused. However, the probability of successful extraction without triggering the failsafe you mentioned is below acceptable parameters. A temporary tactical reassessment is required. Dottie's hologram brightened. Are you suggesting a truce, Officer Shell? I'm suggesting information exchange. Shell's galactic eyes fixed on Nina. Human Voss, you possess a device of significance beyond your comprehension. I propose a limited cooperative arrangement to determine the extent of its capabilities and the veracity of its historical records. Nina looked at Dottie, who gave a subtle nod. All right, Nina said cautiously. But I keep the interface, and you don't try any extraction procedures. We share information, that's all. Agreed, with one condition, Shell countered. Any reality-altering functions must be approved by me before activation. The risks of unauthorized temporal manipulation cannot be overstated. Deal. Nina extended her hand out of habit, then realized the gesture might be meaningless to Shell. To her surprise, the chronological integrity officer extended a crystalline appendage and briefly touched her palm. A tingling sensation, like static electricity, passed between them. Contact agreement registered, Shell stated. Now, I suggest we relocate. This refuge's temporal signature has been compromised. Additional consortium agents will arrive within 14 standard time units. Where do you suggest we go? Nina asked. Somewhere unexpected. Shell moved to the refuge's control panel and input a series of commands. The consortium maintains a database of all known originator sites. However, my studies of pre-purge historical records suggest the existence of undocumented locations, sites deliberately obscured from official records. Dottie floated to Shell's side, studying the input sequence. You've been researching the originators outside of sanctioned channels? That's grounds for immediate recalibration in the consortium. Shell's facets dimmed slightly. Accurate historical documentation is the foundation of proper chronological integrity. I discovered inconsistencies in the official records. My investigations were conducted in service to the consortium's ultimate mission of truth preservation. Nina exchanged glances with Dottie. It seemed their Gakoi adversary might have more complexity than initially apparent. The interface should be able to detect these hidden locations, Dottie said. Nina, try accessing the deep scan function. Hold the start and select button simultaneously. Nina did as instructed. The DS's screens filled with cascading symbols before displaying a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, with several pulsing points of light that hadn't been visible before. Dimensional storage gateways, Shell breathed, a note of awe in their mechanical voice. The theoretical repositories of uncorrupted historical data. Their existence has been debated in restricted academic circles for centuries. And now we know they're real, Nina said. Question is, do we go one of them? The nearest gateway appears to be in the Vale Nebula region, Dottie observed. Approximately 17 light-years from our current position. A direct translocation of that distance would create a temporal wake detectable across multiple sectors, Shell warned. We would have the entire chronological integrity division converging on our position. Then we'll have to take the scenic route, Nina suggested. Multiple shorter jumps to mask our trajectory. Shell considered this a viable strategy. I can provide coordinates for minimal surveillance transit points. And I'm supposed to trust you? Nina asked, skeptically. Trust is irrelevant. Logic dictates my cooperation. If I wish to betray you, I would simply signal for reinforcements now. Shell's crystalline form shimmered. I have dedicated my existence to preserving historical integrity. If the consortium has compromised that mission, verification is required. Nina looked at Dottie, who gave what approximated a shrug. Chrono officers are programmed for absolute dedication to historical accuracy. If Shell suspects the consortium of historical manipulation, their programming would create a serious cognitive conflict. Fine, Nina decided. We'll do this together. But at the first sign of betrayal, you will activate the interface's failsafe and potentially destabilize the entire space-time continuum. Shell finished for her. A prospect that benefits none of us. Now, shall we proceed before my colleagues arrive? Over the next several hours, they made a series of carefully calculated jumps across the galaxy. Each translocation brought them to increasingly remote locations. An abandoned mining outpost on a rogue asteroid, the atmospheric processing station of a terraforming project abandoned centuries ago, the subterranean chambers of an extinct civilization. Throughout their journey, Nina learned more about the true capabilities of the device she carried. With Dottie's guidance and Shell's reluctant insights, she discovered it could do far more than simply record or display historical data. The interface was designed as both archive and restoration tool, Dottie explained as they rested in the hollow core of a gas giant's maintenance satellite. In the event of catastrophic timeline manipulation, it could restore erased potentialities, essentially reactivating doorways to what might have been. Dangerous technology, Shell commented. The potential for reality fracture is incalculable. Only if misused, Dottie countered. The originators built in safeguards. The interface requires not just genetic compatibility, but ethical alignment. It won't execute commands that would cause widespread harm. Nina looked down at the innocuous pink gaming device. So, it has some kind of moral compass. More like an ethical calculation engine. It assesses potential outcomes across multiple dimensional planes before executing major changes. The consortium teaches that such assessments are impossible, Shell said, a note of uncertainty in their voice. That reality is too complex for accurate prediction, which is why all temporal manipulation must be centrally controlled and limited. Convenient philosophy for maintaining a monopoly on time, Dottie remarked. Their final jump brought them to the outskirts of the Veil Nebula, a vast cloud of glowing gas and dust that stretched across the void like an iridescent curtain. Hidden within its swirling patterns was a small, unremarkable planetoid composed primarily of dark matter, invisible to most conventional sensors. As they materialized on its surface, Nina gasped at the sight above them. The nebula filled the sky with colors she had never seen before, shifting and pulsing as if alive. The veil is a natural temporal anomaly, Shell explained, their voice uncharacteristically soft. Time flows differently here. The consortium avoids it for that reason. Too many variables for effective monitoring. Perfect place to hide a dimensional storage gateway, Dottie observed. Nina, the interface should be able to detect the exact location. Try the scan function again. Nina activated the deep scan. The DS hummed and vibrated slightly in her hands, its screens displaying a directional arrow that pulsed more rapidly as she turned in a specific direction. This way, she said, beginning to walk across the planetoid's low-gravity surface. Each step sent her bouncing several meters forward, requiring some adjustment to her movements. They followed the interface's guidance to what appeared to be a sheer cliff face of black stone. The arrow pointed directly at the solid surface. Dead end, Nina asked, perplexed. Dimensional gateways exist partially out of phase with normal space-time, Shell explained. Physical barriers are irrelevant. Precisely, Dottie confirmed. Nina, place the interface against the rock face and press the power button twice in rapid succession. Nina did as instructed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the cliff face before them began to shimmer and dissolve, revealing a narrow passageway that seemed to lead into impossible darkness, a void deeper than the space surrounding the planetoid. Dimensional threshold identified, the interface announced. Warning, chronological distortion detected beyond gateway. Temporal protection advised. What does that mean? Nina asked. It means time inside doesn't match time outside, Dottie explained. We could spend minutes in there and emerge to find years have passed out here, or vice versa. The interface will shield its user from the worst. Effects, Shell added, but I will experience the full disparity without protection. Nina looked at the chrono officer. Is that a problem for you? Shell's crystalline features shifted in what might have been resignation. I am programmed to pursue historical truth regardless of personal cost. If temporal distortion is the price of verification, then I shall pay it. That's surprisingly noble, Nina admitted. It is merely logical, Shell replied, though there seemed to be something more in those cosmic eyes, something almost like conviction. Together, they stepped through the dimensional gateway. The passage beyond defied conventional physics. The walls, floor, and ceiling, if such terms even applied, seemed to flow like liquid one moment and solidify the next. Colors shifted through spectrums Nina had no names for, and occasionally she glimpsed what appeared to be windows into other times and places, brief flashes of events both familiar and utterly alien. The gateway is showing us timeline fragments, Dottie explained as they progressed deeper. Potential realities stored in dimensional memory. After what felt like both seconds and hours, they emerged into a vast circular chamber. The space was dominated by a structure that resembled a tree made of light, its branches extending in all directions, each terminating in what looked like a small, glowing fruit. The archive tree, Shell whispered, their voice reverent. I had thought it merely metaphorical. Each fruit contains an entire timeline, Dottie explained. Complete records of reality paths that were pruned from the main continuum. Nina approached the tree, drawn by an inexplicable pull. As she neared, the interface in her hands pulsed in sync with the tree's luminous heartbeat. The originators created this place as a failsafe, Dottie continued. If their civilization was erased, as indeed it was, these records would remain, preserved outside normal space-time. Nina reached out toward one of the lower-hanging fruits. Can I? Careful, Shell warned. Direct contact with pure temporal data can overwhelm unprotected neural systems. Use the interface as a buffer, Dottie suggested. Hold it up to the fruit you want to examine. Nina selected a small, ruby-colored fruit and raised the DS toward it. The screens immediately filled with streaming data, images, sounds, an entire civilization's history condensed into a format her mind could barely comprehend. This is the Mabari, she realized, but not as they exist now. I'm seeing them as they would have been without Gakoi intervention. They developed space travel independently. They created an artistic renaissance that influenced a dozen other species. Shell moved beside her, those galaxy eyes fixed on the screens. This contradicts all official historical documentation. Because your consortium erased this potential, Dottie said softly. They deemed independent Mabari development a threat to Gakoi cultural dominance. Nina moved to another fruit, this one pulsing with golden light. Again, she used the interface to access its contents. This one shows the Corlax, Professor TYX's species, but they're nothing like I know them. They're not bureaucrats and administrators. They're philosophers and theoretical physicists. They discovered principles of reality manipulation that rivaled the originators themselves. Impossible, Shell stated, but with less certainty than before. The Corlax have always been a species dedicated to order and structure. Their natural evolutionary path led them to administrative excellence. Or that's what they were molded to become, Dottie countered. After the Gakoi systematically eliminated their more creative potential timeline branches, Shell stood motionless, a being caught between programming and revelation. If this is true, there's more, Nina said, moving to a larger fruit that pulsed with blue-white energy. When she accessed it, her eyes widened. This is Earth, human civilization. But we developed space travel centuries earlier than we actually did. We made contact with other species peacefully, became part of the galactic community as equals, not as archaeological curiosities. The data streaming through the interface showed humans working alongside dozens of alien species, contributing unique perspectives and creativity to collective problems. Earth became a cultural hub, a place where the galaxy's diverse beings came to exchange ideas and art. The consortium maintains that humans were too volatile, too unpredictable for early space integration, Shell said, but the officer's voice now held a note of doubt. That your proper developmental path required isolation until your tendencies toward chaos could be properly channeled. You mean until we could be controlled, Nina corrected. Until we could be shaped into museum curators of our own past, rather than contributors to the galaxy's future. As if responding to her rising emotion, the interface suddenly pulsed with new energy. Its screens displayed a prompt. Critical historical discontinuity identified. Restoration point available. Initiate timeline reactivation sequence. Dottie, what does this mean? Nina asked, alarmed by the intensity of the device's reaction. It means the interface has found a nexus point, a moment where multiple timelines diverge significantly, a point where reality could be restored to a different path. Shall step back. You cannot consider this. Reality restructuring would create catastrophic temporal backlash. Billions of beings exist in their current states based on established continuity. The interface wouldn't offer the option if it would cause harm, Dottie argued. Remember the ethical calculation engine I mentioned? It's designed to find restoration points that would integrate smoothly, with minimal disruption to existing consciousness streams. Nina stared at the prompt on the screen, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. I need to understand what would change. Can I see it before deciding? Try the preview function, Dottie suggested. Press L, R, and select simultaneously. Nina activated the combination. Immediately, the chamber around them transformed into a holographic display of galactic history, but not the history she knew. She watched as humanity developed differently, as the Mabari flourished independently, as the Korlax pursued philosophical understanding rather than bureaucratic perfection. Most significantly, she saw the Gakoi Consortium not as the dominant galactic power, but as one civilization among many in a more balanced community of species. This is how it was meant to be, Dottie said softly, before the systematic pruning of timeline potentials. Shell's crystalline form had dimmed considerably, the officer's internal struggle visible in fluctuating patterns across their faceted surface. I was created to protect historical integrity. If the history I've defended is itself a fabrication. Nina felt a sudden sympathy for the being who had been her pursuer. Your purpose doesn't change, Shell. You're still protecting true history, just not the version you were programmed to believe in. The officer looked at her with those cosmic eyes. If you activate this restoration point, what becomes of existing reality? Of me? According to the interface's calculations, consciousness streams would be preserved and integrated, Dottie explained. You would still exist, Shell, but with awareness of both timeline potentials. Everyone would. It wouldn't erase the present. It would expand it to include what was lost. Nina looked back at the prompt still flashing on the screen. The choice seems obvious, but this is an enormous responsibility. Who am I to reshape galactic history? You're human, Dottie said simply. A species defined by curiosity, creativity, and the willingness to embrace change. The interface bonded with you for a reason. The decision must be yours, Shell added unexpectedly. I cannot advise you either way. My programming. Conflicts. Nina took a deep breath, looking around at the archive tree with its countless fruits, each a lost possibility, a road not taken. Then she looked down at the innocent pink gaming device that had thrust this impossible choice upon her. If I do this, what happens next? Dottie's hologram shimmered. The interface will initiate a cascading temporal restoration. The effects will ripple outward from this protected space, gradually reintegrating the suppressed potentials with current reality. For most beings, it will feel like remembering something they had forgotten. Nina's finger hovered over the confirmation button. And the Gakoi? They will remain a significant power, Dottie assured her, but one among equals, as they were before their temporal manipulations. They will remember their actions, which may be punishment enough. With one last moment of hesitation, Nina pressed the button. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then, slowly, the archive tree began to pulse with increasing intensity. Each fruit glowed brighter, and streams of light flowed from them into the trunk and down into the floor of the chamber. The interface in Nina's hands grew warm, its screens displaying complex calculations and progress indicators. Restoration sequence initiated, it announced. Timeline reintegration, 2% complete. How long will this take? Nina asked, watching as the percentage slowly ticked upward. Time is flexible here, Dottie reminded her. For us, perhaps minutes. For the galaxy outside, the process will unfold more gradually. Days, weeks, perhaps months of subtle changes as reality realigns. Shell stepped closer to the tree, reaching out to touch one of the glowing fruits. As their crystalline fingers made contact, the officer gasped, a sound Nina hadn't thought them capable of making. I remember, Shell whispered. I remember the truth. The Gakoi were scholars once, keepers of knowledge, not controllers of it. We documented history. We did not shape it. Timeline reintegration. 15% complete. The interface updated. The chamber began to vibrate gently, the walls rippling like water. Through these liquid-like surfaces, Nina caught glimpses of changing realities, star systems rearranging, civilizations evolving along different paths, histories reweaving themselves. This feeling, Nina murmured, as new memories began to surface in her mind. I remember Earth making first contact centuries earlier. I remember growing up learning about alien cultures as commonplace knowledge. But I also remember my life as it was before. Both timelines exist within you now, Dottie explained. The original potential and the manipulated one. In time, they'll settle into a cohesive whole. Timeline reintegration. 47% complete. Shell S form had begun to change subtly. The rigid, militaristic aspects of their crystalline structure softened, becoming more fluid and artistic in design. The cosmic eyes remained, but now they held understanding rather than rigid authority. My function evolves, the officer said with wonder. I'm still a guardian of time, but a preserver of all potentials, not just sanctioned ones. As the reintegration percentage continued to climb, the chamber itself began to transform. The stark, utilitarian design flowed into something more organic and beautiful, a space of learning and contemplation rather than mere storage. Timeline reintegration, 89% complete. Nina felt a strange lightness spreading through her, as if layers of invisible constraints were lifting from her mind and body. Knowledge she had never learned flowed into her consciousness. Languages, cultural understandings, scientific principles that bridged human innovation with alien wisdom. I understand why the interface chose you now, Dottie said, her holographic form becoming more defined, more present. Humans in this restored timeline are nexus points, natural connectors between different species and thought patterns. Your adaptability made you perfect vessels for preservation. Timeline reintegration, 100% complete. Restoration successful. The archive tree gave one final, brilliant pulse of light before settling into a steady, healthy glow. The fruits remained, but now they appeared more integrated with the branches, less like separate entities and more like natural extensions of the whole. What now? Nina asked, looking down at the interface, which had returned to its unassuming appearance as a pink Nintendo DS. Now, Dottie said, her hologram smiling, we return to a galaxy that remembers its true self. A galaxy where the originators are not forgotten, where multiple species share knowledge and power, where Earth takes its rightful place as a member of the galactic community. Shell, their form now a harmonious blend of structure and fluidity, nodded in agreement. I must return to the Gakoi, not as they were, but as they should be. There will be adjustment difficulties. Many will resist the new memories, the dual histories now in their minds. Will they try to reverse what we've done? Nina asked, concerned. They cannot, Dottie assured her. The reintegration is fundamental, woven into the fabric of reality itself. One cannot simply erase what has been restored to its natural state. Nina looked at the interface in her hands. And this? What happens to it now? That depends on you, Dottie replied. The chrono-archival interface has fulfilled its primary function, but remains a powerful tool for historical documentation and preservation. It can continue to serve that purpose in the right hands. You mean my hands? Nina said, understanding dawning. The interface chose you for a reason, Dottie confirmed. In this restored timeline, your role isn't just cataloging Earth artifacts. You could become something more, a temporal historian perhaps, someone who ensures that history remains intact and accessible in all its complex potential. Shell stepped forward. Such a role would traditionally fall under Gakoi jurisdiction, but in this restored reality, partnerships are more common. Human intuition combined with Gakoi methodical analysis could prove effective. Nina couldn't help but smile at the formal way Shell suggested what sounded suspiciously like a job offer. Are you asking me to work with you? I am suggesting a mutually beneficial arrangement for historical preservation. Shell replied, those cosmic eyes now showing what might have been humor, with appropriate autonomy for both parties. A temporal research team, Dottie added enthusiastically, with me as your guide to the interface's full capabilities. We could document history as it truly unfolds, without manipulation or control. Nina looked between them, the holographic AI and the crystalline time guardian, then down at the innocent-looking pink gaming device that had changed everything. I started this week cataloging plastic sporks. Now you're suggesting I help safeguard the true history of the galaxy. Life takes unexpected turns, Dottie said with a digital chuckle, especially when time itself is involved. As they prepared to leave the dimensional gateway, Nina felt both uncertainty and excitement about the changed galaxy awaiting them. The interface hummed in her hands, ready for whatever came next. So, she asked as they approached the threshold, what's our first assignment as temporal historians? Shell consulted a data stream that flowed through their crystalline form. There appears to be an anomalous historical divergence in the Andromeda sector, a civilization that remembers two contradictory first contact events. Sounds intriguing, Nina said. Dottie, can the interface get us there? The hologram grinned. Of course. Just select the destination on the galactic map and press start. Nina did as instructed, the familiar controls now feeling natural in her hands despite the extraordinary power they commanded. As the dimensional gateway prepared to return them to normal space-time, she couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. From cataloging relics to rewriting history with a Nintendo DS, she mused. I'd call that a career upgrade. The gateway activated, enveloping them in translocation energy. As reality reformed around them at their new destination, a vibrant, diverse spaceport that existed somewhere between the timeline she had known and the one newly restored. Nina held up the interface and studied it with new appreciation. Ready for level 2? She asked her companions. Shell's crystalline features arranged themselves into what was definitely a smile this time. I believe the appropriate human response is game on. Dottie's hologram flickered with excitement. Just remember, in this game, there are no extra lives, but infinite possibilities. As they stepped into the bustling spaceport, where humans mingled freely with dozens of alien species in a harmony that would have been unimaginable in the timeline Nina had left behind, the interface glowed softly in her hands. No longer just a relic, but a key to the future. And somewhere in the vastness of time and space, the last echoes of the originator's consciousness acknowledged their creation's success and the curious symmetry of their most powerful technology finding its way home, disguised as a child's toy, waiting all along for the right player to press start.